we're looking at the model of the digestive tract. There's a lot to see on this model. Let's start at the beginning where our food starts and go to the end where our food ends. What we do is we take food in to our oral cavity here. It's called food when it's served, and when we chew it, it's now called a bolus. We're going to swallow that. It's going to go down our throat or our pharynx, into our esophagus, and into our stomach. We're now going to call that chyme. Let's go back up here. We call this our pharynx, this passageway, common passageway for food and air. If it's behind the nose, specifically we're going to call it nasopharynx. If it's behind the mouth, we will call it oropharynx. And here's the larynx, so if it's behind the larynx, we're going to call this the laryngopharynx. So now we're going into the esophagus. That's our muscular tube. There's a sphincter here going into the stomach after the esophagus called the esophageal sphincter. So the first major organ that we're going to get to here, we're going to call this the stomach. The stomach has a greater curvature on the bottom called the greater curvature and a lesser curvature on top called the lesser curvature. You guessed it. Hanging off the greater curvature is the greater omentum. We see it represented here by these lines. These lines do not do it justice. You definitely have to look on the cadaver to see the greater omentum. The folds here in the stomach are rugae. As we go in, we pass the very beginning. This section here right at the beginning is called the cardia. This is right below your heart. So sometimes if you get a little bit of reflux coming up, that's heartburn. The esophageal reflux. Okay. The top part of the organ here is the fundus. The major portion would be the body. This section here, right before we go into the duodenum, this is called the pylorus. So the sphincter at the end of the stomach is the pyloric sphincter. So generally speaking, the stomach is pretty well closed off with the pyloric sphincter on one end and the esophageal sphincter at the beginning, because the acid is pretty darn strong in here. You don't want it where it doesn't belong. After the stomach, we go into the small intestine. The small intestine is in three major sections. This first C-shaped section here is called the duodenum. After that, we go into a section called the jejunum, and then we go down toward the bottom, and this is the ileum. Keep in mind on the model, this is just a big tan blob, but again, on the cadaver, we can see this really well. The stomach has a huge size. The duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, is about half the diameter. The jejunum is about half the diameter of the duodenum, and down here toward the ileum, it's about half the diameter of the jejunum. So we're getting progressively smaller as we break down that food. That's the small intestine. The purpose of the small intestine is to absorb the nutrients and to break down that food. After the small intestine, we're going to go into the large intestine or colon. This is like a picture frame that goes around the small intestine. So the first pocket of the large intestine or colon is called the cecum, and this little structure hanging off is the vermiform appendix. So between the ileum and the cecum, this valve would be the ileocecal valve. Here we're going to go up, that will be our ascending colon. We have a bend or a flexure right here below the liver. We'll call that the right colic flexure, or we can call it the hepatic flexure. Right colic means it's on the right side of the colon, and hepatic means near the liver. We go across here, we're going to go across, that's called the transverse colon. Now over here we have another bend on the left side, that's our left colic flexure, but because it's close to the spleen, we can also call that our splenic flexure. Then if we go down, we're in the descending colon. Then we get to an area here which is S-shaped, sigmoid colon. After the sigmoid colon comes the rectum, and then the anus and the external anal sphincter on the bottom. Okay? You'll notice this ligamentous band coming around here. This is called the Tena Coli. And then these bumps here, singular are hostrum, plural are hostra. The reason these bands form is because of differential growth. We'll see the Tena Coli from the time a baby's born, but it grows more slowly than the surrounding large intestine. So as this grows slowly, it forms these little pockets, and you actually won't see these until a baby's about a year or two old. Okay? Let's go back up and see what else we can see on this model. I mentioned the pancreas earlier. The head of the pancreas nestles in the C shape of the duodenum here. And we have, this is our common bile duct coming down. The common bile duct joins with the the main pancreatic duct and goes into the duodenum. Let's take a closer look at the liver. We have another model which is specifically for the liver, but you can see quite a bit on this one. We have 4 lobes. The large lobe here is our right lobe. The one on the left side is our left lobe. Then there's a ligament here between called the falciform ligament. This model does not show the ligamentum teres of the liver coming off the liver, but you can see that very nicely on the cadaver. This bladder here is the gallbladder. It's marked 10A on the model, which means that somebody thinks that'd be a really good practical question. Okay, learn all of the model, not just 10A. So this is the gallbladder. Coming out of the gallbladder, the duct we have is the cystic duct. Coming out of the liver, the one we have is called the hepatic duct. Where the hepatic duct meets with the cystic duct, we get the common bile duct, which you can see this common bile duct goes down all the way down here. So we can ask it in either place, here or here. Let's go back to the liver for a moment. I called this the large right lobe and this the left lobe. The other 2 lobes are the small square one here, which is the quadrate lobe. The quadrate lobe you can always find between the falciform ligament and the gallbladder. Then in the back here, it looks like a little tail. That would be our caudate lobe. Caudate, of course, meaning tail. Then we see a number of vessels in through here. This very large vein we have coming up here is our inferior vena cava. But these 3 structures here represent our portal triad. This artery in bright red is our proper hepatic artery. This vessel here in sort of a pinkish color is supposed to represent our hepatic portal vein. The hepatic portal vein carries the nutrient-rich blood from the small intestine, the jejunum and the ileum, and it takes those nutrients to be dropped off in the liver before joining up with the inferior vena cava. So think of it as going to the bank and you have a great deal of money. You want to drop that money in the bank before you continue on your journey. It's a bypass. The 3rd structure of the portal triad is the common bile duct. So the proper hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, and common bile duct make up the 3 structures of the portal triad. That's the guts.